Hello everyone, welcome back again to the NPTEL online certification course on research methodology for planning and architectural studies. So far we have discussed about various parametric, non-parametric tests, hypothesis testing. We have also discussed about different stages of a research process, data collection, sampling, sample size, etc. Now, I am very much sure about the fact that you understood all those components and also that help you to figure out some of the important aspect of the research that you are doing currently. Now, if you recall at the very beginning of this particular course, I have mentioned about different types of research. There we have discussed about policy research, quantitative research, qualitative research, etc. Now, definitely which research approach or which research method is the best one, it is not having a single answer. Like the way the one size doesn't fit all, so it also depends on the type of research that you are conducting. Maybe the research that you are going to conduct for your domain, maybe the qualitative research approach will be appropriate, or maybe in some cases the mixed method approach is needed. Now those kind of decision on what type of methods will use and what type of methods will not use, that we have discussed. Now it is time to go deep into some broad research method approach, or you can say that to be specifically now we will be discussing on three very important aspect or three important research approach. First one, the quantitative research approach. Second one, the qualitative research approach, and the third one, the mixed method approach. So in all those cases, like definitely we need more understanding, we need more information that how to apply this and what are the different characteristics of this type of research approach, and we'll try to understand all this aspect based on certain case studies. So today at lecture number 39, we'll be discussing on quantitative research approach, and we'll try to understand its different aspect, followed by some of the case studies in our upcoming lectures. So I'll try to demonstrate some of the case studies, some of the research conducted by researcher and have been published in reputed journals, and how they have used this quantitative approach to fulfill their research aim. And we'll try to understand the different type of tools, techniques, representation that they have adopted to draft their manuscript. Now, without any further delay, let us start today's lecture, which is lecture number 39, Quantitative Research Approach. So, what we learn from this lecture? Definitely, this is all about the quantitative research approach, what exactly it is, the meaning of quantitative research, advantages of quantitative research. Then we will also discuss about the limitation of the quantitative research approach, and also try to understand the potential application of this quantitative research in the field of planning and architecture. Now coming to the definition as such, quantitative research, what exactly it is? It is a systematic empirical investigation of observable phenomena via statistical, mathematical and computational techniques. So, when we talk about the information, when we talk about the data, empirical data, and we analyze that data to come out with some sort of relationship among the variables, or maybe we will just make certain sort of prediction out of the existing data, then we just go for this quantitative research approach. So, quantitative research approach involves collecting and analyzing numerical data to test hypotheses and answer research questions. As because we formulate the hypothesis based on the research questions, then when you analyze the data and then test the hypothesis, whether you'll able to reject it or fail to reject the null hypothesis, based on that you make some conclusion. and then accordingly the research questions will be answered through your research. It also aims to quantify the relationship between variables, make predictions, and also it generalize the result to a larger population. Because whenever, like earlier also we discussed, that whenever we go for a sample survey, so sample is something just a representation of the target population. So when you quantify some of the relationship, quantify some of the correlation, so then accordingly you can make certain kind of prediction for the target population. This research approach has widely been used in the fields such as psychology, sociology, planning, economics, marketing, education, health science, and many more, even in the architecture and also the building science, to provide the empirical evidence and informed decision making. Because this is something that we require, the informed decision making. Out of the phenomena, out of the findings, we take a conclusion, whether it is like building materials that to be fixed in a construction site, or it is some sort of strategy that we are going to adopt. It may be something like you just study a population and then find that okay, this is something which is required for the infrastructure improvement. So accordingly you can quantify and then you just implement that. Coming to the characteristics of quantitative research, definitely in this case, if we discuss it in the broad category, definitely the first one is the objectivity. So here whenever you are measuring something, so that means there is no such kind of subjectivity, or you can say a qualitative approach. So it is aiming to minimize the researcher's bias and subjectivity in data collection, analysis and interpretation. Because whenever it is the actual data, so there is nothing called perception, so then we are actually reducing the subjectivity, or in this particular case, and we enhance the objectivity of the research, of the analysis in this quantitative research approach. Next comes about the reliability. So in this method, the researcher strives for the reliability, ensuring that the study can be replicated by other researcher to obtain the consistent result. So that's what, like if you know that there is a relationship between two variables, if it has been done or it has been established through a quantitative research approach, so this relationship will be much more universal. So even if you just do it with certain other area, or in a bigger area, or with more respondent into that particular study, so you'll observe the similar kind of behavior. Coming to the validity component of it, so definitely the quantitative research approach seeks validity by measuring accurately what it intends to measure and produce the valid conclusion. So this is something very much mathematical and empirical in nature. Next is the generalizability. So it aims to generalize the findings, allowing the findings to be applied to a broader population beyond the study sample. That is what I have just mentioned. Suppose you just conduct one study based on certain sample of 500, 600 people, but if it is done through a systematic process, through all this numerical data, and you find out that there is a relationship between their car ownership and the mode choice, okay, for their travel, so then it will be established mathematically, and then you can actually use it for the entire population. So the trip rate calculation, per day trip rate, or maybe it is the demand of water per day, all such kind of calculation can be very easily done with this kind of approach. So we can generalize the findings, we can use it for a bigger target population, not limited to the sample. Now, coming to the type of quantitative research, so in this case, definitely descriptive research that we already discussed in detail, that where based on the data we just provide the very first hand information about say sample distribution, say it may be just male female, or maybe it is just the income distribution through pie chart or maybe table. So representation of data may differ researcher to researcher and depending on the need, but overall it is very first hand information. We are not really going to discuss more in the descriptive research. Now coming to the next one, which is correlational research, that if we have say 5 6 variables and we try to establish that what is the interrelationship among them, so then you can go for this correlation research as a quantitative research approach. Now the other one that you can also go for experiment, right? It is not like a questionnaire based survey. You set up certain sort of experiment, you select certain subjects for taking part into that environment, control environment, and your experiment setup, and then finally you just record all the information, and then you just try to relate it with the findings, with the respondent behavior to those kind of control environment, etc. Say for example, if you want to make a study on some sort of cognitive ability to distinguish or to feel about the indoor temperature or indoor thermal comfort. So in all such cases you should have such kind of environment, control environment, the experimental setup, and then you put your subject over there and try to capture some of the body vitals, or maybe you can use the EEG devices, or maybe some sort of heart rate variability devices, or other kind of GSR, etc., to measure it, and then try to relate that under different scenario with change of the temperature or humidity, or maybe the flow of wind and other different parameters which are applicable for a controlled environment, for a for some indoor environment. So you can relate that and you can then try to establish the relationship. So that can be done through experimental research. Next is very important, that is the longitudinal research, where we conduct a research, same research to a group over a time, so that you can see the changes, the temporal changes over time. Now the other one is the cross sectional. So in this case it is just a particular moment. So something is going on. So you just intercept, you just make a cross section, a particular time you just extract the information. That is cross sectional research. Meta analysis is something very important. If you recall, we have discussed it during our literature review discussion. This is something very important, where you can use the quantitative findings of past research. You try to establish certain sort of relationship among the past findings, and also try to find out some effect size, etc. So if you have missed that lecture, somehow I request you to go through that. There I have explained it, that okay, how you can take up different past studies of similar nature, and then similar variables are measured, but maybe the sample size or maybe the findings, the correlation, they were different. Then how you can relate them to find out or bring out some sort of conclusion out of it. Factor analysis is also very important aspect, and in this case what we do, like definitely whatever the attribute that we consider for our study, and finally we try to make factor out of it, because maybe there are say 50 60 attributes which are affecting certain behavior. Say if I just consider a random example, that pedestrian environment or the pedestrian behavior, so that will depend on say 60 parameters. Say for example, the road width, the noise level, the street furniture. So there are a number of attributes that can affect the pedestrian behavior on sidewalk or footpath. Now, if we want to club them to a factor, so this factorization is something where similar look like attributes will clubbed into this, but definitely in this case we will apply certain sort of uh, quantitative techniques. We can go for principal component analysis or clustering, by which we'll try to associate all those attributes coming to a common factor. Say some factor can be infrastructure factor, some factor can be the psychological factor, okay, where all these the time, the mood, all those things can be captured. Path analysis is another way where we try to establish the relationship between the different latent construct and all, and try to understand that how each of them they are affecting others. Say for example, in this case if you have say 4 factors, and then this is maybe the overall satisfaction. So for each factor you have, say this is a factor for the same context I am trying to find out, this is factor 1, factor 2, factor 3 and factor 4. So these 4 factors are actually affecting the overall satisfaction. So it has certain sort of relationship. Now each of the factors may be like measured through multiple attributes. So factor 1 may be attribute 1, attribute 2, attribute 3, attribute 4. Then in this case maybe attribute 5, attribute 6. So like that, the factor 1, the satisfaction will depend on all these attribute, and then overall satisfaction will be like will be depending on these 4 factors. So these are nothing but all these path, and we have certain hypothesis that we form that probably it is influencing positively, this is influencing negatively, and then we estimate the path coefficient through maybe the uh, partial least square method, or it may be through some structural equation modeling. The another one is the regression analysis, where we'll have a dependent variable and there are independent variables, how independent variables are affecting the dependent variables, that we can do with the regression analysis. Now definitely if not all, I'll try to provide some of the case study where they have used such kind of you know quantitative research approach, those kind of methods that they have used, like a regression, or maybe in some cases that correlation analysis, so that it will be clear to you that okay, how authors they have used it, and then they just achieve their goal of their research. Now coming to the step in conducting quantitative research, it is not totally different from any particular research that we talked about so far. So again in this case we have to start with formulating the research questions, we have to clearly define the problem, and also we have to establish the hypothesis. Many research may not have directly written hypothesis, but there are certain assumptions or perceived idea about it. Next, the designing the study, where we have to determine the research design, we have to select the variables and the method to analyze the information. Then we gather the data using appropriate instrument, whether it is experimental setup or it is survey based questionnaire, what kind of sampling strategy that you want to adopt, whether it will be probabilistic, non probabilistic, whether it is random or it is just convenience sampling. Then the sample size is also a big factor, but in this case also sample size, because I have seen some of the questions coming up in the forum that whether for each and every study the sample size will be the same the way I have shown that using the formula, that if it is something like a case study based study, and just you need to survey some of the buildings to note their architectural features or some historical importance, whether the same formula will be applied. So basically it is not, for such kind of cases, if you apply this formula, probably for 100 buildings you will get only one building as minimum sample size, but that is not correct. So it will also depend on certain other aspect. Those other aspects are like about the variance. This variance is something like whenever you just select one building, you measure certain parameters, you select other building, you also measure the same parameters, but there will be some sort of difference in the measurement, right? So in those cases, if you have so much of variation, so that means different type of buildings are present in that study area, so you have to increase the sample size. But if you have almost like say for example you are just going for a typical suburban apartment building. So if you know that in a particular housing apartment block, so there are some sort of prototype, like you have one particular 2 bedroom or 3 bedroom 3 bhk, this kind of layout, and then it is something like they are just having 3 4 blocks, orientation may be little different. So in those cases definitely, like if you capture one such kind of building with a orientation, so that may be applicable for such other type as well. So in that case, whenever you find that variation is less, you can lower down that particular sample size. So definitely, like we'll discuss more on this thing in forum, but as this particular things come in this slide, so I just thought to explain. So for such cases, if you find that in your study area, if you have more variation in terms of all those criteria that you set to measure the building characteristics, so you have to increase the sample size. If your 100 buildings are different, so you have to take all 100 buildings. If you find that no, there are say 5 8 categories that you find, so in that case the sample will be like that, those one representation from each category. Coming to the data analysis, in this case we need to analyze the data using statistical method and then draw conclusion. Drawing conclusion is very important, and here, as because it is based on some empirical data, so the findings will also have some objectivity that we discussed in the previous slide. Now research design in quantitative research, in this case it can be experimental design where it involves some manipulation of variables and random assignment of participant to the experimental and control groups. So in this particular case, what is happening, what exactly the meaning of manipulation of variables? So don't simply go with the word manipulation, which normally you may get confused that what manipulation in research sir is talking about. So this manipulation is nothing but changing the different label of the variable, changing the different labels of the parameters, and try to create different scenario of experiment. Say as I just mentioned, that if you want to understand the human perception towards the thermal comfort in some indoor environment, so maybe the parameters like temperature, humidity, then the wind flow, etc. So those kind of cases, they are nothing but different variables. Now say for example you want to increase the humidity, or you just want to decrease the temperature. So all such cases you are just tuning with different environment and try to observe the variation that been perceived by the subject or the respondent. So that is why it is mentioned as manipulation of variables. So the changing different labels and all. Quasi experimental design is similar to experimental design, but it lacks the random assignment. It is not random, so it is just experimenting with the same subjects. Non-experimental design is normally based on observational study without manipulation of variables. So, here you just go for some observation survey, like say for example, we want to just find out the volume to capacity ratio of a urban road. So, which is something to be measured, where you need to have some sort of vehicle count, whether you can count manually with tally system, or you just use some sort of videography, and then from there you extract the information. Coming to the data collection in quantitative research, it can be done through survey, where questionnaires or interview administered to gather the information from participant. The questionnaire can be close ended, it can be open ended, it can be like a combination of both, that we have discussed in the respective presentation. Now, the data can be also extracted through control experiment. So, control setting, where variables are manipulated to observe their effects. So, that is what I have just explained. Observations, it is systematic recording of behavior or events in natural or control settings. So, even if you set up a control environment and you just observe through some sort of camera, or maybe just through your eyes you are observing the behavior, or else it is something like which is in natural environment, you try to understand the trajectory of vehicle movement in a particular crossing, or maybe it is something like you want to just measure some sort of crowd behavior in a crowded railway station, or maybe in a mega event like Kumbh Mela, or maybe in some mega event like any festival, or maybe it is something like just after ending a international cricket match, and also spectator they are coming. So, for those kind of crowd movement you can also use it. Now, this quantitative research can also be done through some of the secondary data collection. So, where the data which are available in different reports per study can be used, and certain sort of analysis can be performed. So, we will also try to understand through some case study, where the secondary data that researcher they have used, and then out of that what are the findings they are coming up with, to give some sort of recommendation. Now, sampling technique, in this case definitely it can be random sampling, where every member of the population has an equal chance being selected. It can be stratified sampling, where dividing the population into different subgroups and randomly select sample from each subgroup. Cluster sampling, little different, where dividing the population into cluster and randomly select the entire cluster. Or it can be convenience sampling, where selecting participant is based on their availability and accessibility. So, each of them they are having certain advantages, disadvantages that we have discussed in the sampling techniques PPT. If you have not gone through, please go through. If you have any questions further, write that in the forum. Now, coming to the data analysis, in this case definitely before we do any analysis, first we need to understand the data. Okay. Then there might be some sort of issues, there might be some errors, there might be some outliers. So, we have to clean those information and process the data for analysis purpose. So, data cleaning and preparation. Before analysis, researcher clean and prepare the data to ensure its accuracy, completeness and consistency. So, if you find some kind of data glitch somewhere in the recorded video, or maybe whenever you depend on certain survey questionnaire, so maybe you will find some questionnaires, some of the informations are missing. So, you have to drop it. Descriptive statistics is summarize and describe the main features of the data. Inferential statistics make inferences and prediction about the population based on sample data. Validity and reliability check. Researchers assesses the validity and reliability of the data and findings to ensure the trustworthiness of this particular result, and also to ensure the accuracy of the result. Okay, now advantages of quantitative research. Objectivity and reliability. Definitely in this case, this quantitative research approach minimize the subjective bias. It provides reliable and replicable results because that is something based on empirical data. Now we also talked about the generalizability. So in this case, findings applicable to larger population as well, enhances the external validity, quantification and precision. This enables rigorous analysis and comparison. It facilitates statistical precision, and also like it is a statistical analysis wide range of statistical techniques available to perform such kind of quantitative data analysis. It also helps to test the hypothesis and determines the significance of it. If we continue, it also has the advantage of efficiency and cost effectiveness. It utilizes structured data collection method, reduces time and resources because it is very much pinpointed data that we require. Clear communication and presentation. It presents like the findings in a clear and organized manner, enhances understanding and communication. Causal inferences. So it establishes the cause and effect relationship between variables. It allows for some sort of experimental manipulation to change the different labels and then try the uh, different output based on this kind of manipulation. Scope for large scale study. uh, this quantitative research approach, they are well suited for large scale research project. It addresses the complex societal issue as well because it has the scalability. Now along with advantages, we also should understand the limitation. The first limitation is the lack of depth. When we remove the subjectivity from our research, it may not capture the richness and complexity of the human experiences because many of such kind of behavior, our emotions, that cannot be quantified directly. It also emphasizes the numerical data over qualitative insight. So that is the drawback, and that is why I said that any methods at its own having some advantages and also there are certain limitations. Difficulty in capturing complex phenomena. Some phenomena cannot be easily quantified or measured, that is one. It limits the understanding of multi-faceted issues. Reliance on numerical data. So quantitative research may overlook the qualitative aspect of phenomena. The narrow focus is on only the measurable thing which is measurable. Potential for reductionism. Often oversimplify complex phenomena into quantifiable components which may not be the right case. Risk of overlooking contextual factor and holistic perspective. Limited scope for exploration. It may restrict exploration of emergent themes or unexpected findings because there are certain hypotheses, there is some sort of predetermined aspect that we try to test. Rigidity in predefined variables and hypotheses. Ethical consideration, sometimes it may overlook the ethical nuances and subjective experiences. It where depersonalizing the participants and reducing the research to just a number. So definitely there are certain sort of limitations. So for that, if you want to measure some kind of subjectivity or qualitative aspect, so probably only quantitative approach will not be adequate, then you can go with the qualitative approach and all. Now coming towards almost end of this presentation, the application of quantitative research in planning and architectural domain, you can apply anywhere. So I have just limited to few that we discussed in the past and also will be discussing through the case study. Infrastructure planning, transportation planning, urban and regional planning, urban renewal and revitalization, tourism and hospitality, health and wellness design, cultural heritage management, user behavior, public policy and its impact, historical preservation, environmental science, architectural design, different type of building performances, disaster management, and many more. So we cannot just simply confine to 20 areas or so. It can be applied anywhere where we want to measure something through numerical data. To summarize this particular lecture, so quantitative research approach, we have understood that where it is a systematic approach by collecting and analyzing the numerical data and provide some sort of insight about the data, and also can help to predict for the entire population. We have discussed about several advantages of quantitative research, and also along with that certain limitation of losing the subjectivity or qualitativeness of the phenomena. Also we have discussed several areas of application in different domain in planning and architecture. So with that we end this lecture here. These are some further reading. So with that, as I already promised, now we'll discuss 5 case studies one after another, where the researcher, they have adopted the quantitative research approach for their research, for their particular study, and then how they have used different methods that they have adopted, different sampling strategy that they have adopted, and finally they could able to publish those findings in a good journal. So along with the reference and all, we'll be discussing those case study. I think with that you'll better understand this overall approach, and definitely in those case study I'll try to make a balance between the application in planning and architectural domain, so that you can get benefited out of it. So till then, thank you, bye bye for joining the course.